I opened my eyes to the faint smell of disinfectant and the buzzing of a fluorescent light. For a moment I thought I was back in the hospital ward where I had died, but then I saw the familiar cream-colored ceiling of my old dormitory room. My heart slammed against my ribs. This was the morning of the final exam, the exam that had ruined my life, the exam where my boyfriend, Leo, had handed me a glass of warm milk laced with sleeping pills right before I walked into the hall. I drank it because I trusted him. I fell asleep in the middle of the test, got expelled for academic misconduct, and spent the next 5 years cleaning toilets while he married my best friend and built his empire. I died alone in a rented room at the age of 28, but now I was back. I could feel the coarse sheets under my fingers, the slight ache in my shoulders from sleeping on the cheap mattress. The alarm clock on the nightstand read 6:30 in the morning. The exam started at 8. I had exactly 90 minutes to rewrite everything. I sat up slowly, careful not to make noise. The room was small, 2 beds, 2 desks, a shared wardrobe. My roommate, Sophie, was still asleep, her face buried in the pillow. She was a good girl, kind and quiet, but she had been Leo's spy back then, not out of malice, but because she worshipped him like everyone else. I didn't blame her, I just couldn't trust her. The door creaked open and Leo walked in, holding a thermos. He smiled that perfect smile, the one I once thought was warm. Now I saw the coldness behind his eyes, the slight curl of his lips that meant he was calculating. He was tall, broad-shouldered, always dressed in clean white shirts. Everyone called him the perfect boyfriend. He had been dating me for 2 years, ever since my family's business started making headlines. My father was a self-made man, and I was the only child. Leo knew exactly what he was doing. "Hey, babe," he said softly, closing the door behind him. "I brought you warm milk. I know you get nervous before exams, it'll help you sleep better tonight, but I figured a little comfort now wouldn't hurt." He handed me the thermos. The lid was already unscrewed. Steam rose in a thin curl. I took it and held it close to my nose. The milk smelled sweet, with a hint of honey, but underneath that sweetness, I caught something else, a faint bitter note, like crushed pills. In my past life I had missed it because I trusted him. Now I knew better. I forced a grateful smile. "Thank you, Leo, you're so thoughtful." He sat on the edge of my bed and rubbed my shoulder. "You've been studying so hard. I want you to do well. After the exam, we can go celebrate. I already booked a table at that French restaurant you like." I nodded, pretending to take a sip. I let the liquid touch my lips but didn't swallow. The bitter taste was unmistakable. He watched me with that soft gaze, his hand still on my shoulder. I knew he was waiting for me to drink more, so I lifted the thermos again, tipped it back, and let the milk flow into my mouth. Then I turned my head slightly and let it dribble into the towel I had draped over the bedpost. He didn't notice. His eyes were on my throat, watching me swallow. I handed the thermos back to him. "It's really good. You should have some too. You look tired." He laughed. "I'm fine. That's for you. Come on," I insisted, pushing the thermos toward him. "You stayed up late helping me review. You deserve a little treat. Just a sip." He hesitated. For a fraction of a second I saw something flicker in his eyes, uncertainty, but he was too arrogant to believe I would suspect him, so he took the thermos and drank. I watched his Adam's apple move as he swallowed a large gulp. "See," he said, wiping his mouth, "now you drink the rest. I'll go get my stuff ready, meet you at the entrance in 40 minutes. He stood up and left the room. The moment the door clicked shut, I poured the remaining milk into the sink and rinsed the thermos. I hid the empty thermos in my bag. The evidence might be useful later. I dressed quickly, dark jeans, a plain white blouse, comfortable shoes. I packed my exam materials, ID card, pens, calculator, water bottle, but instead of going to the exam hall directly, I took a detour to the campus clinic. I knew the nurse on duty, Mrs. Chen, a kind woman in her 50s who had always been good to me. I told her I had a stomachache and needed something for nausea. She gave me a small packet of anti-nausea tablets. I thanked her and slipped the packet into my pocket. By 7:40, I was standing at the entrance of the main building. Leo was already there, looking pale. The sedative was starting to kick in. He was blinking slowly, his eyelids heavy. He tried to smile at me, but his voice was slurred. "Hey, you ready? Are you okay?" I asked, feigning concern. "You look really tired." He shook his head. "Just a little sleepy. Maybe I should get some coffee. There's a vending machine inside. Let's go." We walked into the building together. The exam hall was a large auditorium with rows of desks. Students were already seated, whispering nervously. Proctors stood at the front, checking IDs. Leo's seat was in the second row, near the window. Mine was 3 rows behind him. On the left side, I sat down and watched him. He was struggling to keep his eyes open. He shook his head, slapped his cheeks. But the drug was too strong. By the time the proctor announced the start of the Exam. Leo's head was already drooping. The first question appeared on the screen. I glanced at it. A calculus problem I had solved 1,000 times in my previous life. I answered it quickly, confidently. 10 minutes into the exam, a thud echoed through the hall. Everyone turned. Leo had slumped forward, his face flat on the desk. The proctor rushed over, shook his shoulder, called his name. No response. Another proctor came with a first aid kit. They tried to wake him, but he was completely unconscious. He's out cold, one of the proctors said. We need to call an ambulance. The exam was halted. Students whispered, craned their necks. I kept my head down, writing my answers. My hand moved steadily, pouring out the knowledge I had accumulated over years of suffering. I knew every formula, every theorem, every trick. I finished the entire paper in 40 minutes when the ambulance arrived. They carried Leo out on a stretcher. His face was slack, drool running down his chin. I watched from the window as they loaded him into the vehicle. A part of me felt a cold satisfaction, but I didn't allow myself to celebrate yet. This was only the beginning. The exam resumed after a 30-minute delay. The proctors announced that Leo's test would be rescheduled due to a medical emergency, but I knew better. The school had a strict policy. If a student was found under the influence of any substance during an exam, it counted as automatic failure and possible expulsion. They would test his blood at the hospital, and when they found the sleeping pills, they would assume he took them himself. After all, why would anyone suspect me? I was the victim, the sweet girlfriend who had been served the same milk. I left the hall with a clear mind. Sophie caught up to me outside, her face pale with worry. What happened to Leo? Is he okay? I don't know, I said, keeping my voice soft. He seemed really tired this morning. I hope he's all right. She bit her lip. Should we go to the hospital? Not yet. Let's wait for the official news. The school will contact us. I walked back to the dormitory alone. The moment I closed the door, I allowed myself a small smile. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the rush of power. In my past life, I had been drugged, expelled, and cast out. Now the shoe was on the other foot. Leo would wake up in a hospital bed, confused and humiliated. His perfect reputation would have its first crack. But I knew this was just the first move. Leo had ruined me not because he wanted to be with someone else, but because my family's wealth was no longer useful to him. He had already secured a deal with a rival company, a deal that required my father to fail. The exam was only the trigger. The real destruction would come from the financial collapse he had orchestrated. I pulled out my phone and called my father. He sounded surprised to hear from me so early. Dad, are you busy today? Just a meeting with the bank. Why? Don't sign anything. Cancel the meeting. Silence. Then, what's going on? I can't explain now. Trust me, delay everything for 2 days. I'll come home tonight and tell you everything. He hesitated. My father was a practical man, not prone to sudden changes, but he loved me, and he had always respected my instincts. All right, I'll call it off, but you better have a good reason. I do. I hung up and sat on the edge of my bed. The next few hours would be crucial. Leo would wake up, realize what happened, and start covering his tracks. He would blame the milk, but he couldn't accuse me without implicating himself. The only witness was Sophie, and she had seen him bring the milk. I had made sure of that. I took out the empty thermos from my bag and wrapped it in a plastic bag. I would hide it somewhere safe, in case I needed it later. Then I packed a small suitcase. I was going home tonight, and I wasn't coming back to this dormitory ever again. By noon, the news spread like wildfire. Leo had been admitted to the hospital with acute sedation. The school administration announced that an investigation would be conducted. I received a text from Leo's mother, asking if I knew anything. I replied with a worried tone, saying I had no idea what happened. She thanked me for being concerned. At 2 o'clock, I visited the hospital. I brought flowers in a fruit basket. Leo was awake but groggy. His eyes were red, his hair messy. When he saw me, he tried to sit up, but the nurse pushed him back down. Hey, I said softly, placing the flowers on the nightstand. I was so worried. Are you okay? He stared at me for a long moment. I could see the gears turning in his head. He knew something was off. He remembered the milk. He remembered me offering him a sip, but he couldn't prove anything. I don't know what happened, he said hoarsely. I just collapsed. The doctor said you had a high dose of sleeping pills in your system. Did you take anything this morning? His eyes widened. He started to say something, then stopped. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw fear in his gaze, not fear of getting caught, but fear of me. He was beginning to understand that I wasn't the naive girl he thought I was. No, he said slowly, I didn't take anything. That's strange. The milk you gave me, did you drink any yourself? He froze. I gave him a sweet smile. You did take a sip, remember? Maybe the milk was contaminated. His face turned pale. He knew exactly what I was implying. If the milk was contaminated, the source would be traced back to him, and if he tried to blame me, the timeline wouldn't match. He had brought the milk to me, I had barely touched it. The only person who drank a significant amount was him. I leaned closer and whispered, "I hope you feel better soon. We can talk when you're out." I left the room without looking back. In the hallway, I passed Leo's mother. She was talking to a doctor, her voice frantic. I avoided eye contact and walked out of the hospital, feeling the warm sun on my face. This was just the first step. The exam was only a small victory. The real war was about money, power, and the people Leo had manipulated to destroy my family. I had 2 years of knowledge from my past life. I knew every scheme he had planned, every ally he had recruited, every weakness he thought was hidden. I was going to burn everything down, piece by piece, and I would start with the one person who had helped Leo ruin me. My so-called best friend, Angela. She was the one who introduced Leo to the rival company. She was the one who fed him information about my father's business. She was the one who smiled in my face while stabbing me in the back. Tonight, I would begin her destruction. The bus ride home gave me time to think. I stared out the window at the familiar streets of my hometown, but everything looked different. The buildings seemed smaller, the trees more faded. It was like seeing a photograph from a life that no longer belonged to me. My phone buzzed with messages from friends asking about Leo, from professors offering sympathy, from Angela herself. "Angela, hey, I heard about Leo. Is he okay? Can I come over? I'm so worried." I smiled bitterly. She was probably worried about her investment. Angela had been my closest friend since high school, but in my past life, I discovered she had been sleeping with Leo behind my back for over a year. She had helped him empty my trust fund, forged documents, and frame me for an embezzlement scheme that sent my father to prison. When I died, they were engaged. I typed back, "He's fine, just tired. Let's meet tomorrow. I have something important to talk to you about." She replied immediately, "Sure, I'm free in the afternoon. Coffee at our usual place." Perfect. I put the phone away and closed my eyes. My father's house came into view, a large 2-story villa with a white gate and a well-kept garden. My mother had planted roses along the driveway. They were in full bloom now. Red and white, beautiful and thorny, just like my plan. My father was waiting at the door. He was a tall man in his 50s, with graying hair and a kind face that had grown tired over the years. He hugged me tightly. "You look different," he said, pulling back to study me. "Something in your eyes." "I'm fine, Dad. I just needed to see you." We went inside. The living room was neat, with leather sofas and a glass coffee table. My father poured me a glass of water and sat across from me. "Now tell me, why did you make me cancel that meeting?" I took a deep breath. Explaining everything would be impossible without sounding insane. So I chose my words carefully. "Dad, do you remember the company that approached you last month, the one offering to buy our distribution network?" He nodded. "Young Enterprises. They made a generous offer. I was considering it." "Don't. They're working with Leo's family. The offer is a trap. They want to take over our business, strip the assets, and leave us with nothing but debt." My father frowned. "How do you know that?" I couldn't tell him I knew from a past life, so I said, "I overheard Leo talking on the phone. He thought I was asleep. He mentioned a plan to bankrupt us and take control of our company." My father's expression darkened. He trusted Leo. Everyone trusted Leo, but he trusted me more. "Are you sure?" "Positive, and there's more. The exam this morning, Leo tried to drug me. He put sleeping pills in my milk, but I didn't drink it. He drank it instead and passed out in the exam hall." My father's face turned red. He slammed his hand on the table. "That bastard. I'll sue him." "No, Dad, don't do anything yet. If we go public now, he'll deny everything and we won't have solid proof. Let me handle it my way. Just delay all major decisions for a week. I have a plan." He studied me for a long time. I could see the conflict in his eyes, the desire to protect me, the pride of a father, the caution of a businessman. Finally, he nodded. "All right, I trust you, but if you need help, you tell me." "I will." That night, I locked myself in my old room and started working. I opened my laptop and pulled up the financial records I had memorized from my previous life. I knew the exact dates of every transaction, every forged contract, every hidden account. I compiled a list of names, Leo's accomplices, Angela's contacts, the lawyers who had helped them. I organized everything into a folder. The first target was Angela. She was the easiest because she was careless. She had a habit of leaving her phone unlocked, of saving passwords in notebooks, of bragging about her plans when she drank. I knew her weaknesses intimately. The next morning, I dressed casually, jeans and a simple blouse, and went to the coffee shop we always frequented. It was a small place near the university, with wooden tables and warm lighting. Angela was already there, sitting by the window, scrolling through her phone. She looked up and waved when she saw me. She was pretty in a conventional way, long black hair, fair skin, a smile that seemed genuine. I sat down across from her. "How are You holding up? She asked, reaching across the table to touch my hand. I can't believe what happened to Leo. Did the doctors say anything? They said he had a high dose of sleeping pills. He's fine now, but the school is investigating. She shook her head in sympathy. That's so weird. Do you think he did it on purpose? I don't know, but I'm more worried about something else. I lowered my voice. I found something in Leo's apartment, a document. It mentioned a business deal with Young Enterprises. Angela's smile froze for a fraction of a second. She recovered quickly, but I saw it. What kind of deal? I'm not sure. I only saw part of it, but it had your name on it. Her eyes widened. My name? That's impossible. I know. I thought it was a mistake, but I took a picture. I pulled out my phone and showed her a screenshot I had created earlier, a fake document I had photoshopped from memory. It looked real enough. The header was from Young Enterprises. The signature was a forged copy of Leo's handwriting, and in the middle, it listed Angela as a consultant with a 10% commission. Her face went pale. She snatched the phone from my hand and stared at it. Her fingers trembled. This isn't real. I never signed anything. I don't know, Angela, but if the school finds out about this, or if my father's company finds out, I let the sentence hang. She looked up at me, panic in her eyes. You have to believe me. I didn't do anything. Leo must have forged this. I want to believe you, but you have to help me prove it. How? Leo keeps a lot of things in his office at home. If we can get inside and find the original documents, we can clear your name, and mine too, because if this deal goes through, my family will be ruined. She bit her lip. I could see the calculation behind her eyes. She was trying to decide if I was bluffing, but the fear of exposure was stronger than her caution. When? She asked. Tonight. He's still in the hospital. His parents are there with him. The house will be empty. She hesitated, then nodded. Okay, I'll do it. I smiled gratefully. Thank you. I knew I could count on you. We finished our coffee and parted ways. I watched her walk away, her shoulders stiff with tension. She was already thinking about how to cover her tracks, but she didn't know that I had already laid a second trap. That afternoon, I visited Leo's house. His parents were at the hospital, but the housekeeper was there. I told her I needed to pick up some of Leo's textbooks for his rescheduled exam. She let me in without suspicion. I went straight to his study, a room I knew well from my past life. I opened the top drawer of his desk and found what I was looking for, a small black notebook. Inside were handwritten notes about his plan, dates, amounts, names. Angela's name appeared multiple times, along with codes that indicated the money she had received. I took photos of every page with my phone, then I replaced the notebook and left. At 9 that night, Angela and I met outside Leo's house. The street was quiet, the houses dark. I had a spare key that Leo had given me months ago. We slipped inside through the back door. His office is upstairs. I whispered, follow me. The house was silent. We climbed the stairs, our footsteps muffled on the carpet. I opened the door to Leo's study and turned on the desk lamp. The room was neat, with bookshelves lining the walls. Start looking in the drawers, I said. I'll check the files. Angela moved to the desk. She opened the top drawer and found the notebook. She flipped through it, her face growing wider with each page. I watched her from the corner of my eye. This is bad, she muttered. This is really bad. What is it? A list of payments. My name is here, but I never took any money. She looked at me, desperate. Somebody is setting me up. I walked over and took the notebook from her hands. I pretended to study it. We need to take this to the police. No, she cried. If we go to the police, they'll think I'm involved. I'll be ruined. Then what do you suggest? She was silent for a moment, then she said, we destroy it, burn the notebook, pretend we never saw it. I shook my head slowly. That won't solve anything. Leo has copies. I know he does. Where? I don't know. But there's someone who might. I looked at her directly. You know who helped him set this up? Tell me the name. Then we can stop them together. She swallowed hard. I saw the war in her eyes, loyalty to Leo versus self-preservation. In the end, selfishness won. It was my uncle, she whispered. He works at the bank. He helped Leo open the accounts. I felt a cold thrill. Angela's uncle, Mr. Jean, was a senior manager at City Commercial Bank. In my past life, I never learned how they laundered the money. Now I had the missing piece. Thank you, I said softly. That's very helpful. I took the notebook and slipped it into my bag. Angela stared at me, confused. What are you doing? I thought we were going to destroy it. No, Angela, we're going to use it. Before she could react, I stepped back and pulled out my phone. I pressed the record button and said, repeat what you just told me. Your uncle helped Leo create accounts for the fraud. Her eyes widened in horror. You recorded me. Of course. Did you think I actually trusted you? She lunged at me, but I was faster. I sidestepped and shoved a chair between us. She stumbled, knocking over a lamp. The crash echoed through the silent house. You planned this, she Hissed, "You set me up." "I didn't set you up. You set yourself up when you chose to betray me. Now I have all the evidence I need. Leo's notebook, your confession, the document from the classroom." She tried to grab my bag, but I pulled it away. I was already moving toward the door. "Wait," she begged. "Please, I'll do anything. I'll help you take down Leo. Just don't ruin my life." I paused at the door and looked back at her. She was crying now, her makeup smeared. "You already ruined my life once," I said quietly. "This is just payback." I walked out of the house and into the cool night air. The streetlights cast long shadows on the pavement. My heart was pounding, but I felt calm. The pieces were falling into place. Leo would be released from the hospital tomorrow. He would find the notebook missing. He would suspect Angela, but he wouldn't be sure. The cracks between them would widen, and I would be ready for the next move. The night air wrapped around me like a cold shroud as I walked away from Angela's house. My footsteps echoed on the empty street, each one carrying me further from the woman who had once been my closest confidant. The notebook felt heavy in my bag, a collection of sins that could destroy multiple lives. I didn't go straight home. Instead, I found a quiet cafe that stayed open late, a nondescript place tucked between a laundromat and a convenience store. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and the smell of stale coffee hung in the air. I ordered a black coffee and sat in the corner booth, my back against the wall, watching the door. My phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. "He knows something's wrong. He's been calling Angela nonstop." I smiled. Leo's paranoia was already working in my favor. I pulled out the notebook and began photographing each page with my phone. The records were meticulous: dates, amounts, account numbers. Some entries were coded, but I recognized enough from my past life. The fraud had started small, testing the system, then grown bolder. 50,000 here, 100,000 there, all funneled through accounts at City Commercial Bank, managed by Angela's uncle. The total amount made my blood run cold. Over $2 million. I closed the notebook and sipped my coffee, letting the bitter taste ground me. In my previous life, I had discovered the betrayal too late. I had confronted Leo, and he had laughed in my face. Then the accident happened, a car accident that left me in a coma for 3 weeks. When I woke up, everything was gone. My money, my reputation, my future. Leo had framed me for the fraud, and Angela had testified against me. That was the moment I understood the true depth of their cruelty. They hadn't just stolen my money, they had stolen my life. But now I had a second chance, and I wasn't going to waste it. I finished my coffee and pulled out my laptop. The cafe's Wi-Fi was slow, but it was enough. I opened a secure email account I had created months ago, one that couldn't be traced back to me. Then I began composing an anonymous tip to the bank's internal audit department. * Senior Manager Zhang at City Commercial Bank has been facilitating fraudulent accounts. Evidence will be provided upon your cooperation. Expect further communication. *. I sent it and closed the laptop. The trap was set. The next morning, I woke early. The sun was just beginning to filter through my curtains when my phone rang. "Angela." I let it go to voicemail. She called again, and again. Finally, I answered. "What?" I kept my voice flat. "Please," she whispered. She sounded like she had been crying all night. "I can't sleep. I can't eat. Leo keeps calling me. He's suspicious." "Good. He's demanding to know where the notebook is. He threatened to come to my house." "Then let him come." "What?" Her voice cracked. "No, you don't understand. If he finds out I lost the notebook, he'll what? Kill you. He's not that brave." I pulled on my jacket and grabbed my bag. "But I bet he'll make your life very difficult, and he'll cut you out of whatever money you were supposed to get." Silence. Then, quietly, "How do you know about the money?" "I know everything, Angela. I've always known." I hung up and walked to the kitchen. My roommate, Sarah, was already there, pouring herself a cup of tea. "Early morning?" she asked. "Something like that." She studied me for a moment, her eyes curious but not probing. Sarah was a good person, kind, trusting, oblivious to the darkness I carried. I kept my distance from her intentionally. The fewer people I cared about, the fewer weapons my enemies could use. "I heard you come in late last night," she said. "Everything okay?" "Everything's fine." I poured myself a glass of water. "I'm just dealing with some old business." She nodded, accepting my vague answer. "Well, if you need anything, I'm here." I smiled, but the smile didn't reach my eyes. "Thanks." The hospital called at noon. Leo had been discharged. I knew, because I had asked my contact to notify me the moment he left. I was waiting in the parking lot when he emerged, leaning on a nurse's arm. He looked pale and weak, his arm in a sling, his face drawn with exhaustion. The accident hadn't been my doing, but I couldn't say I was sorry it happened. It had given me time to set my plans in motion. As he climbed into his car, I watched from my own vehicle, a nondescript sedan I had rented under a false name. He didn't see me. He was too busy fumbling with his phone, probably calling Angela. I followed him at a safe distance, watching as he drove to his apartment. He parked and sat in the car for a long moment, staring at his phone. then he got out and walked inside, his movements slow and deliberate. I waited. 20 minutes later, he emerged again. This time, he was moving faster, his phone pressed to his ear. He got back in his car and sped off. I followed him to a coffee shop near the university. He went inside, and I watched through the window as he sat down at a table, his back to the door. A few minutes later, Angela arrived. I smiled. Perfect. I didn't go inside. Instead, I parked across the street and watched through binoculars. They were arguing. I could see it in their body language. Angela was crying, her hands shaking as she tried to explain. Leo was furious, his face red, his good hand slamming the table. The cracks between them were widening. Soon, they would break apart completely. I pulled out my phone and called my contact at the bank. I had cultivated this relationship over months, sending anonymous tips, building a reputation as a credible source. Check the accounts under Leo's name, I said. I'll send you the account numbers. You'll find irregularities dating back 2 years. Who is this? The voice on the other end asked. A concerned citizen. I hung up and sent the account numbers from my secure email. Then I sat back and watched the show unfold inside the coffee shop. Angela walked out first, her face pale, her eyes red. She didn't see me as she got into her car and drove away. Leo stayed behind, staring at his phone, his jaw tight. I waited until he left, then followed him back to his apartment. He went inside and didn't come out. I checked my phone, a message from the bank. We've initiated an internal investigation, more details soon. The game was moving faster than I expected. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything that had happened. The notebook was safe in my bag, the recording of Angela's confession was on my phone, and the bank was investigating, but I knew it wasn't enough. Leo was smart. He had connections, money, and resources. If I pushed him too hard, he would fight back, and he wouldn't play fair. I needed a plan B. I sat up and opened my laptop. I had been researching for months, building a case against Leo and his network. I had documents, witness statements, financial records. But I had been holding back, waiting for the right moment to strike. The moment was now. I began compiling an anonymous report for the FBI. I had enough evidence to open a serious investigation into Leo's activities, but I couldn't send it yet. I needed to time it perfectly. I needed Leo to feel cornered. I needed him to make a mistake. I put the laptop aside and lay back down. Sleep came slowly, but when it did, it was deep and dreamless. The next morning, I woke to a series of frantic texts from Angela. Asterisk, he knows I lost the notebook. Asterisk, comma, asterisk, he's coming to my house. Please. You have to help me. Asterisk, comma, asterisk, where are you? Asterisk, I deleted the messages and didn't respond. I had no sympathy left for Angela. She had made her choice when she chose to betray me. Now she had to face the consequences. I focused on my own preparation. I had a meeting with a lawyer at noon, a man I had been cultivating as an ally. He was young, ambitious, and hated Leo with a passion. Leo had ruined his sister's life too. I arrived at the law office early. The receptionist led me to a conference room where the lawyer, David Chin, was waiting. I have something for you, I said, sliding the notebook across the table. He picked it up and flipped through the pages, his eyes widening. My God, this is everything. It's the first domino, I said. I have more. He looked up at me. What do you want from me? Justice, I said, and leverage. He nodded slowly. I can work with this, but I need more proof, names, dates, transactions. I'll get them for you. We talked for another hour. Strategizing. David was sharp, his mind quick and precise. He saw the angles I had missed and pointed out potential weaknesses in my plan. You're playing a dangerous game, he said as I was leaving. Leo is not a man who forgives. I know. Be careful. I smiled. I'm always careful. That evening, I checked the bank's internal portal. My contact had sent me a message. We've frozen 3 accounts. Senior Manager Zhang is suspended pending investigation. Good work. I felt a surge of satisfaction. The first piece had fallen. I called Angela. She answered on the first ring, her voice hoarse. What do you want? Your uncle has been suspended. Silence. Then, I know. The bank is investigating. It's only a matter of time before they find everything. What do you want from me? Nothing, I said. I already have what I need. She started crying again. Please, you can't do this. My uncle is innocent. He was just trying to help me. He was helping you commit fraud, I said coldly, and he was helping Leo steal from innocent people. He didn't know what he was doing. He knew exactly what he was doing, just like you knew, just like Leo knew. I hung up and blocked her number. I had no more time for her excuses. The game was moving forward, and I needed to stay ahead. The next day, I saw Leo again. He was sitting in his car outside my apartment building, watching my window. I felt a chill run down my spine, but I didn't let it show. I walked out of the building and Approached his car, my heart pounding. "Leo," I said, my voice calm, "you're out of the hospital." He rolled down the window. His eyes were dark, his face hard. "Where is the notebook?" "June, I don't know what you're talking about. Don't play games with me." His voice was low, dangerous. "I know Angela gave it to you. Angela gave me a lot of things," I said, "but I didn't ask for a notebook." He stared at me, his jaw tight. "You're lying. Believe what you want." I turned and walked away. Feeling his eyes on my back, my hands were shaking, but I forced myself to stay calm. I had expected this, I had planned for it. I got into my car and drove to a safe location, a small apartment I had rented under a fake name. I had prepared everything: food, water, a laptop with a secure connection, and a burner phone. I would stay there until the next move. The time had come to escalate. I opened my laptop and sent the anonymous tip to the FBI. I included the notebook's contents, the recording of Angela's confession, and the bank's investigation report. I added a timestamp and a list of all known accounts. Then I sat back and waited. The FBI would investigate. They would find enough evidence to press charges. Leo would be arrested. Angela would be arrested. Her uncle would be arrested, and I would be free. But I knew it wouldn't be that simple. Leo had connections. He had lawyers. He would find a way to delay the investigation, to muddy the waters, to fight back. I needed to be prepared for that. I called David Chin. "The tip has been sent." "Good," he said. "I'll start preparing the civil case. If the FBI moves slowly, we'll hit them from another angle." "Agreed. We need a witness, someone inside the operation." "I'm working on it." The witness came from an unexpected source. His name was Marcus, and he had been Leo's accountant for 3 years. He had watched the fraud grow, had kept the books, had known exactly what he was doing. But when Leo cut him out of a deal, Marcus turned bitter. I found him through a mutual connection. His name mentioned in passing during a conversation at a bar. It took me a week to track him down, another week to convince him to meet with me. We met in a park, on a bench near the playground. Children were laughing, playing, oblivious to the darkness around them. "Why should I trust you?" Marcus asked. He was a thin man with nervous eyes and a twitch in his left hand. "Because I can offer you something Leo can't," I said. "Protection." "From what?" "From the fallout when this all comes crashing down. You know what Leo does to people who betray him." He was silent for a long moment. Then, quietly, "I kept copies of everything: financial records, emails, recordings of phone calls. I was preparing an exit plan." "Give them to me. What do I get in return?" "Immunity," I said. "I have connections. I can make sure you're not prosecuted." He stared at me, searching for a lie. I stared back, unwavering. "Okay," he said finally. "I'll give you the files." I spent the next week analyzing Marcus's evidence. It was damning, everything from the original planning of the fraud to the execution and cover-up. Leo had been thorough, but not thorough enough. Marcus had kept records of everything. I sent copies to David Chin, to the FBI, and to a journalist I had been cultivating. The journalist was eager to break the story, but I held him back. The timing needed to be perfect. Leo was getting more desperate. He had called me multiple times, leaving angry and threatening messages. He had sent people to watch my apartment. He had even tried to break into my car, but I was always one step ahead. I moved between safe locations, never staying in one place for more than a day. I changed my phone number regularly. I covered my tracks. The pressure was building. I could feel it in the air, a tension that made every interaction feel electric. The breaking point came on a Thursday. I was sitting in a cafe, reviewing the latest documents, when I saw Leo walk in. He was alone, his face pale, his eyes wild. He spotted me immediately and walked to my table. "June," he said, his voice shaking, "I need to talk to you. Sit down." He sat across from me, his hands gripping the table's edge. "You've won." "I don't know what you mean." "The FBI raided my office this morning. They arrested my lawyer, my accountant. They're coming for me." I didn't react. "Is that so?" He leaned forward, his eyes pleading. "I need you to call them off. I'll give you anything, money, property, anything." "I don't want your money, Leo." "Then what do you want?" I looked at him, remembering the betrayal, the pain, the years of lost time. "I want you to rot in prison," I said quietly. "I want you to know what it feels like to lose everything." He stared at me, his face falling. "You're not going to help me." "No." He stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. "You'll regret this," he said, his voice cold. "I promise you, you'll regret this." He turned and walked out of the cafe. I watched him go, my heart pounding. The game was almost over, but I knew the final move would be the most dangerous. 2 weeks later, Leo was arrested. I watched the news coverage from my safe apartment, a cold satisfaction washing over me. The FBI had found enough evidence to charge him with fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. Angela and her uncle were arrested the same day. The journalist I had been cultivating broke the story, detailing the entire scheme. The public was outraged. Leo's reputation was ruined. I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The revenge I had planned for so long was finally complete, but I knew it wasn't truly over. There would be trials, appeals, and attempts at retribution. Leo had allies I hadn't uncovered yet, and he would try to turn them against me. I needed to be ready. I packed my bags and moved to a new city, disappearing into the crowd. I changed my name, my appearance, my identity. I started a new life, far from the shadows of the past, but I never forgot the lesson I had learned: trust no one, and always be prepared for the next move. The game had ended, but the scars remained, and I carried them with me, a reminder of what I had lost and what I had gained. I was free, but at what cost? The answer was one I would carry with me forever. The cost had been everything, but it had been worth it. 6 months had passed since Leo's arrest. I had settled into a quiet life in a small coastal town, working as a freelance editor, living alone in a modest apartment overlooking the ocean. The days were calm, the nights peaceful. The scars of the past were healing slowly, but I knew the peace wouldn't last. I had followed Leo's trial from a distance, reading the updates in the news. He had been convicted on multiple counts and sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. Angela had received a lighter sentence, 10 years, for cooperating with prosecutors. Her uncle had been sentenced to 8 years. The justice system had worked, at least in part, but I knew there were still loose ends. Leo's associates, the ones I hadn't uncovered, were still out there. They might come looking for revenge. They might try to rebuild the network Leo had left behind. I stayed vigilant. I kept my safe locations, my burner phones, my escape plans. I was ready for whatever came next. The phone call came on a rainy Tuesday evening. I was reading a book, a cup of tea in my hand, when the burner phone buzzed. I picked it up, not recognizing the number. Hello, is this June? The voice was unfamiliar, low and gravelly. Who's asking? My name is Victor. I have information about Leo's operation. My blood ran cold. What kind of information? The kind that can help you finish what you started. There's another player, someone Leo was working with who hasn't been caught. I sat up straight, my heart pounding. Who? That's not something I can discuss over the phone. We need to meet. Why should I trust you? Because I was Leo's partner, Victor said, and I know everything. The meeting was set for 3 days later, in a diner on the outskirts of town. I arrived early, scanning the area for threats. The diner was nearly empty, just a few customers sitting at the counter. Victor arrived at exactly 8 o'clock. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered, with graying hair and a weathered face. He looked like a retired boxer who had seen too many fights. June, he said, sliding into the booth across from me. Victor, I'll cut to the chase, he said, his voice low. Leo wasn't the mastermind. He was a front man. The real operation was run by someone else. Who? His brother, Michael. I felt a chill run down my spine. I had never heard of Michael. Leo had never mentioned a brother. Michael is still out there, Victor continued, and he's rebuilding. He has new accounts, new partners, new plans. He's smarter than Leo, and more dangerous. Why are you telling me this? Because Michael wants to kill you, Victor said bluntly. He blames you for Leo's imprisonment, and he doesn't forgive. I stared at him, processing the information. What do you want from me? I want to help you stop him, Victor said. I have my own reasons. He betrayed me, cut me out of a deal. I want revenge. I studied his face, searching for lies. He stared back, unwavering. Prove it, I said. Victor's evidence was compelling. He had documents, recordings, and financial records that tied Michael to a network of offshore accounts and shell companies. The operation was larger than Leo's, more sophisticated and more dangerous. I spent a week analyzing the information, confirming its authenticity. It was real, Michael was real, and he was a threat. I called David Chin. We have a new problem, I said. Tell me. I explained the situation. David listened in silence, then said, this is bigger than we thought. Michael has connections in law enforcement, in politics. He's not going to be easy to bring down. I know. We need to be careful. If he discovers we're investigating him, he'll move against us. I'm already on his radar, I said. He wants me dead, then we need to hit him first. We strategized for hours, building a plan. It was dangerous, risky, but it was the only way. The first phase was information gathering. I went deep undercover, using false identities and safe locations. I contacted Marcus, who confirmed Victor's story. He had heard rumors about Michael, but had never met him. It's a different level, he said, his voice nervous. Leo was small time compared to Michael. He's connected to drug cartels, organized crime, even foreign governments. Can you get me more information? I'll try, but it's dangerous. If Michael finds out I'm helping you, he won't find out. I hired a private investigator, a former CIA agent with a reputation for discretion. She was expensive, but she was worth it. Within a month, she had gathered detailed intel on Michael's operations. The picture was terrifying. Michael had built an empire spanning 3 countries, involving money, laundering, arms trafficking, and drug smuggling. He had dozens of associates, hundreds of employees, and a network of corruption that reached into the highest levels of government. Taking him down would require more than just evidence. It would require a coordinated effort involving multiple agencies and jurisdictions. I contacted the FBI, the DA, and Interpol. I shared the information I had gathered, positioning myself as an anonymous source. The agencies were skeptical at first, but the evidence was too compelling to ignore. An investigation was launched. The next move was personal. I knew Michael would eventually find me. I needed to be ready. I relocated again, moving to a new city under a new identity. I bought a gun and trained with it daily. I set up security systems in my apartment and mapped out multiple escape routes. I was living like a fugitive, always looking over my shoulder, never trusting anyone. It was exhausting, but it was necessary. Loneliness crept in during the quiet moments. I had no one to share my fears with, no one to lean on. The isolation was the hardest part, but I knew it was the only way to stay safe. The attack came on a cold night in November. I was returning home from a late meeting when I felt someone watching me. I turned, scanning the street, but saw nothing. The feeling persisted as I walked up the stairs to my apartment. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The apartment was dark, but I sensed a presence. I reached for my gun, but it was too late. A man emerged from the shadows, his face hidden behind a mask. He was fast, tackling me before I could react. I hit the ground hard. The air knocked from my lungs. "Where are the files?" he hissed, his hand around my throat. I struggled, kicking and clawing. He was strong, but I was desperate. I reached for the knife I kept in my boot and drove it into his side. He grunted, loosening his grip. I pushed him off and scrambled to my feet, gasping for air. We faced off, the knife in my hand, blood dripping from his side. He was smaller than I had thought, wiry and quick. "You're making a mistake," I said, my voice steady. "I'm not the one you should be afraid of. You're dead," he snarled, lunging at me. I sidestepped, slashing at his arm. He cried out, stumbling back. A siren wailed in the distance. The man looked toward the window, then back at me. "This isn't over," he said, and fled through the back door. I collapsed against the wall, my heart pounding. I had survived, but barely. The reality of the situation hit me like a ton of bricks. Michael had found me, and he would send more men. I needed to end this. I called Victor. Michael attacked me. What? How? He found my apartment. I don't know how, but he found me. Victor was silent for a moment. Then, "He's getting closer. We need to move faster." I agree. What's the next step? "There's a meeting in Shanghai in 2 weeks. Michael will be there with his partners. If we can get evidence of that meeting, we can take down the entire operation." "How do we get in?" "I have connections, but it'll be dangerous." I took a deep breath. "I'm in." The Shanghai operation was the most dangerous mission I had ever undertaken. Victor arranged for me to pose as a potential investor, a wealthy businesswoman looking to launder money. I studied the role for days, learning the jargon, the culture, the expectations. I flew to Shanghai under a false passport, staying in a hotel chosen by Victor. The city was a blur of lights and noise, a world away from the quiet coastal town I had left behind. The meeting was held in a private room at a luxury hotel. I arrived early, dressed in an expensive suit, my hair styled, my makeup flawless. I looked the part, but inside, I was terrified. Michael entered the room at precisely 8 o'clock. He was taller than Leo, broader, with cold eyes and a cruel smile. He greeted each person in the room, his handshake firm, his gaze piercing. When he reached me, he paused. "I don't believe we've met. I'm a new investor," I said, my voice steady. "I was told you're the man to talk to." He studied me for a moment, his eyes narrowing. Then he smiled. "Welcome, let's do business." The meeting lasted 4 hours. I feigned interest in their plans, asking questions, taking notes. I recorded everything, my body wired with hidden cameras and microphones. When it was over, I left quickly, my heart pounding. I had done it. I had gotten the evidence we needed. The aftermath was swift. The recordings were sent to the FBI, the DA, and Interpol. Within a month, Michael was arrested in a coordinated operation involving law enforcement agencies from 3 countries. His empire crumbled, his associates were arrested, the corruption was exposed. I watched from a distance as the news unfolded, a sense of closure washing over me. The revenge I had sought was complete, but the cost had been high. I had lost my old identity, my old life, my old self. I was a different person now. Hardened by the battles I had fought, I returned to the coastal town, to my quiet apartment, to my peaceful life. The scars of the past would never fully heal, but they no longer hurt as much. I sat on the beach one evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. The waves crashed gently against the shore, a soothing rhythm that had become my companion. My phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. "You're free now. He's gone. It's over." I didn't know who sent it. I didn't need to know. The message was clear. I smiled, a genuine Smile for the first time in years. The game was finally over, and I had won, but I knew the lessons I had learned would remain with me forever. Trust no one, always be prepared, and never underestimate the power of revenge. I was free, and that was enough. I sat on the beach for a long time after reading that message, the phone glowing in my hand as the sun dipped below the horizon. The words echoed in my mind, "You're free now. He's gone, it's over." Simple, final, yet something gnawed at me. Hey. Splinter of doubt that had lodged itself deep in my gut the moment I'd first seen those letters. Freedom. It tasted like salt spray and the faint bitterness of lingering adrenaline. I'd spent so many months consumed by the hunt for Michael that I'd forgotten what stillness felt like. Now, with the evidence submitted and his empire dismantled, I should have felt nothing but relief. Instead, I felt hollow, like a clock that had finally stopped ticking, its mechanism worn out but still humming. With residual energy, I stood up, brushed the sand from my trousers, and walked back to my apartment. The coastal town was quiet at this hour, a handful of tourists sipping wine on restaurant patios, the distant sound of a guitar from a beachfront bar. I'd chosen this place for its anonymity, its gentle monotony. No one here knew my past, my real name, or the blood I'd spilled to get here. But that anonymous message suggested someone did know. Someone had been watching Section 5, The Unraveling. Thread. I spent the next 3 days in a state of deliberate inaction. I went for long runs along the shoreline, cooked simple meals, and slept without dreams. I told myself that the message was probably from Victor, a final reassurance from the man who had orchestrated the entire operation. He had a penchant for cryptic farewells, and we had agreed to cut all contact after the mission was complete. It made sense. But Victor wasn't the type to use unknown numbers. He preferred encrypted apps, burner phones, and face-to-face meetings in places that were impossible to trace. A simple text from an unregistered SIM card felt sloppy, uncharacteristic. On the fourth morning, I broke my self-imposed isolation. I pulled out the backup phone I'd kept hidden in a false bottom drawer, a device that had never been used in the operation, its only purpose being as a last resort lifeline. I dialed the number Victor had given me for emergencies. It rang 3 times, then went to voicemail. A generic female voice. "The subscriber you are trying to reach is not available." I tried again an hour later. Same result, a knot tightened in my chest. Victor was never unavailable. He was the kind of man who answered every call within 2 rings, no matter the time or place. His disappearance, if that's what this was, meant something had gone wrong. I needed to know who had sent that message, and why. The first lead came from the message itself. I had saved it on my personal phone, but I never assumed the sender would be stupid enough to leave a trace. Still, I had resources. One of the skills I'd developed during the Michael operation was a working knowledge of digital forensics, enough to trace a message without raising alarms. I drove to a public library 3 towns over, using a prepaid laptop I'd bought with cash. The library's Wi-Fi was unsecured, and I knew better than to use my own network. I connected through a series of VPNs and Tor nodes, then ran the message through a metadata extraction tool. The results were as expected. The number was a disposable SIM, activated 4 days ago and used only once. The carrier was a small, regional provider that didn't require registration. Dead end. But the timing was interesting. The message had been sent at 8:47 p.m. Exactly 30 minutes after the final news report of Michael's arrest appeared on international media. That suggested someone was waiting for the exact moment to contact me. Someone who knew my schedule, my habits, my location. How else would they know I'd be on that beach, watching the sunset? The thought chilled me. I had been careful, painfully careful, to cover my tracks. I had changed my appearance, used fake identities, rotated safe houses. Even Victor didn't know where I'd settled after the operation. We had agreed to a complete blackout of communication for mutual safety. So who is this mysterious benefactor? I decided to reach out to my only remaining contact in the old world, a retired hacker known only as Cypher. He had helped me in the early stages of the Michael operation, providing digital camouflage and misdirection. He had no ties to the mission's outcome, and he operated outside the usual circles. If anyone could trace the message without triggering alarms, it was him. Finding Cypher wasn't easy. He changed his aliases as often as I changed my socks, but I knew his one weakness: a love for vintage pinball machines. There was a rundown arcade in the industrial district of a city 100 miles north, where he'd once told me he kept a machine with a custom modification. I drove there the next morning, the highway a blur of gray and green. The arcade was a relic from another era, flickering neon lights, the smell of stale popcorn, and the incessant ding-ding-ding of games that had long since been forgotten. A few teenagers with dyed hair and too much attitude huddled around a fighting game. The owner, a heavy-set man with a stained apron, barely looked up when I walked in, I found the pinball machine in the back corner, a 1978 Medieval Madness table with a crack in its glass. I inserted a token and played a single round, then deliberately hit the tilt sensor 3 times in rapid succession. It was the signal. 10 minutes later, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses slid onto the stool next to me. He smelled like cigarettes and old circuitry. "You're supposed to be dead," he said without looking at me. "Missed me?" "Not particularly. You cost me a good number of favors, and you vanished without a thank you." He fed a token into the adjacent machine, a battered Star Trek table. "What do you want?" I slid the burner phone to him, the message still displayed. "I need to know who sent this." He glanced at the screen, then back at his game. "Anonymous number, burner sim, probably already destroyed. What makes you think I can find anything?" "Because you're Cypher, and because if anyone can, it's you." He grunted, pocketed the phone, and continued playing. "I'll see what I can do. Don't call me." "I'll call you." Then he was gone, swallowed by the arcade's dim light. 3 days passed in a fog of uncertainty. I stayed in a cheap motel near the arcade, leaving only to buy food and pay in cash. I avoided using my credit cards, my phone, anything that could be traced. The walls of the room felt like they were closing in, and every creak of the floorboards made my heart stutter. On the third night, a knock came at my door, not a polite tap, but a firm, rhythmic pattern, 3 quick beats, followed by 2 slow ones. It was the signal Cypher and I had agreed upon years ago. I opened the door a crack, and he slipped inside, his face pale and drawn. He was carrying a leather satchel, which he placed on the bed. "You're not going to like what I found," he said. "Tell me." He opened the satchel and pulled out a thin folder. Inside were a series of screenshots, transcripts, and a single photograph. The photograph showed a man in his late 50s, clean-shaven, with gray hair slicked back and cold, calculating eyes. He was wearing a tailored suit, standing in front of a floor-to-ceiling window that overlooked a city skyline I didn't recognize. "Do you know him?" Cypher asked. I studied the face. There was something familiar about it, the sharp jawline, the way his mouth curved into a half-smile, but I couldn't place it. "No, he's the one who sent the message." The SIM was registered to a shell company, which traced back to a foundation, which traced back to a private trust. That trust is controlled by a man named Alistair Crow. Cypher tapped the photograph. "This is him." The name meant nothing. "Who is he?" "He's a ghost. Officially, he's a retired venture capitalist with interests in pharmaceuticals and logistics. Unofficially, he's the man who runs a network of intermediaries that have their hands in everything from arms dealing to corporate espionage. He has no criminal record, no known associates, and no digital footprint beyond a few dormant accounts." I felt a cold dread settle in my stomach. Why would he send me that message? That's the interesting part. Cypher pulled out a transcript of a recorded phone call. The voices were muffled, the audio quality poor, but I could make out fragments. Asterisk, "The project is complete. Our mutual friend is in custody. Asterisk, comma, asterisk, and the agent. Asterisk, comma, asterisk, unknown. He went dark after the transfer. Asterisk, comma, asterisk, find him. The board wants a debrief. Asterisk, comma, asterisk, understood. Asterisk, the call was dated 2 days after Michael's arrest. The voices were male. One with a British accent, the other American. Neither sounded like Crow. "There's more," Cypher said. He handed me a second photograph, this one grainy, taken from a security camera. It showed a man in a long coat entering a building. The timestamp was from 3 weeks before the operation. "That's Victor. He was meeting with someone at that address. The building belongs to one of Crow's shell companies." My blood ran cold. Victor had been in contact with this Crow person before we even executed the plan. That changed everything. Had Victor been working for Crow the entire time, or was he just another pawn, unaware of the larger game? I thought back to the months of preparation, to the countless late-night meetings where Victor had laid out every detail of the operation with surgical precision. He had been my anchor, my confidant, the only person I trusted in the chaos. If he had been compromised, then everything I thought I knew was a lie. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Because you asked, and because I don't like being used." Cypher's eyes were hard. I did some digging into Crow. The more I found, the more I realized that your little operation against Michael, it was just a piece of something bigger. Michael was a liability. Someone wanted him gone, and they used you to do it. They used me, yes, and Victor was likely their tool to keep you on track. The room spun. I sat down on the edge of the bed, my hands shaking. All that pain, all that sacrifice, it had been orchestrated. I had been a weapon, not a warrior, a cog in a machine I couldn't see. What did that make me? A puppet whose strings had just been cut loose with a mocking message. "You're free now. He's gone. It's over." Free? I had never been free. I had been transferred from one cage to another, and the keeper had just informed me that the game had ended, without ever telling me the rules. "Where is Crow now?" I asked, the steel returning to my Voice. Cypher shrugged. He moves between 3 known residences, a penthouse in London, a villa in Monaco, and a compound in the Swiss Alps. He's heavily guarded, and he never stays in one place for more than a week. If you're thinking of paying him a visit, I'd advise against it. I'm not asking for advice. He sighed and handed me a USB drive that contains everything I found, names, locations, patterns. Use it wisely. And don't contact me again. He stood, collected his satchel, and walked to the door. Before leaving, he paused. One more thing, the message you received, it wasn't a farewell, it was a test, of course. Crow wanted to see what I would do. Did I accept my freedom and disappear, or did I start pulling at threads that would lead me back to him? I had already begun pulling, and that was exactly what he wanted. I spent the next week in a state of controlled fury. I studied the contents of the USB drive, cross-referencing names and addresses with public records and digital breadcrumbs. The picture that emerged was of a shadowy organization, not a criminal syndicate in the traditional sense, but a network of influence that operated through layer after layer of legitimate business. Alistair Crowe was the apex. He never gave direct orders, he never signed anything. Instead, he communicated through a series of trusted lieutenants, each of whom ran their own compartmentalized operations. Michael had been one of those lieutenants, a high-profile asset who had become too visible, too dangerous. When the heat from the FBI and Interpol grew too intense, Crowe had disposed of him, using me as the executioner. But why? What had Michael done to earn his master's displeasure? The USB drive contained a partial answer, an encrypted file that Cypher had managed to partially decode. It was a financial ledger showing large payments from Michael's accounts to a series of offshore shell companies, but the flow wasn't outward, it was inward. Someone had been paying Michael, not the other way around, and the amounts were staggering. I cross-referenced the dates. The payments had started 3 years ago, around the time Michael had begun expanding his operations into Europe. They had increased exponentially in the last 6 months, coinciding with the period when I had been tailing him. Someone was funding his empire, feeding him resources, and then someone had pulled the plug. The question was, what had Michael done to deserve being cut loose? Had he tried to break free from Crowe's control? Had he discovered something he shouldn't have, or had he simply become too expensive to maintain? The answers lay in one place, Crowe himself. I decided to go to London. It was the most accessible of his residences, and it had the advantage of being a city I knew well from my former life. I booked a flight under a false identity, using a passport that Victor had provided for emergencies. The passport was still clean. No flags, no tags. For now, the flight was uneventful. I sat in the window seat, watching the clouds drift below, and ran scenarios through my mind. How would I approach Crowe? What would I say? The direct approach was suicide. His security was too tight, and he would never agree to meet an unknown. No, I needed leverage, something he wanted, or something he feared. The USB drive mentioned a name that caught my attention, Dr. Helena Voss. She was listed as a consultant for one of Crowe's pharmaceutical subsidiaries, but her actual field of expertise was genetic engineering. The file said she was working on a project called Genesis, but the details were heavily redacted. A bioweapon, a medical breakthrough, something else. Whatever it was clearly important to Crowe, and if I could find it, I could use it. The problem was that Dr. Voss was missing. According to the records, she had stopped showing up for work 2 months ago. No resignation, no termination, no police report. She had simply vanished. I had a feeling I knew where to look. London welcomed me with a grey drizzle and the perpetual rumble of traffic. I took a tube to a district I knew well, a part of the city where anonymity was a commodity and questions were unwelcome. I checked into a small hotel that catered to travelers who paid in cash and left no trail. That evening, I visited an old contact, a former MI6 analyst named Francesca, who had retired to run a bookstore in Camden. She was one of the few people I trusted implicitly, and she owed me a favor from a previous life. The bookstore was cozy, filled with the smell of old paper and dust. Francesca was behind the counter, reading a worn copy of a thriller. She looked up when I entered, her eyes widening for a fraction of a second before she composed herself. Well, I thought you were dead. Rumors of my death have been greatly exaggerated. I sat down on a stool next to the counter. I need information. You always need information. She closed her book and leaned forward. What's the angle? Alistair Crowe. Ring any bells? Her face paled. That name isn't one to be tossed around lightly. What have you gotten yourself into? I gave her the condensed version, the operation against Michael, the anonymous message, Cypher's findings. She listened in silence, her fingers drumming on the counter. You're walking into a hornet's nest, she said when I finished. Crowe is connected at the highest levels. He's got friends in every government, every intelligence agency. If you try to take him down, you'll be Crushed, I'm not trying to take him down, I'm trying to understand why he used me. Same thing. In his eyes, you poking around as a threat. She was right, but I didn't have a choice. I couldn't just go back to my quiet coastal life, knowing that I had been a pawn. The thought would eat me alive. Help me find Dr. Helena Voss, I said. She's the key. Francesca sighed and pulled out a laptop. I'll see what I can do, but if this goes south. I never met you. 3 days later, I had an address. Dr. Voss's last known location was a secluded farmhouse in the English countryside, about 2 hours north of London. It was owned by a shell company that traced back to Crow's network. She had been seen there as recently as a week ago. I rented a car and drove out on a misty morning. The roads narrowed and twisted, flanked by hedgerows and fields of green. The farmhouse was at the end of a long, unpaved lane, surrounded by a high stone wall topped with razor wire. A security camera swiveled as I approached. I parked 100 meters away and observed. The place looked quiet, no guards visible, no vehicles in the driveway, but the camera was a tell. Someone was watching. I had come prepared. I pulled out a small drone from my bag, a consumer model that I had modified with a thermal camera. I launched it, keeping it low and behind a tree line, and circled the property. The thermal reading showed one heat source inside the main building, a single person, sitting in what appeared to be a study. The pattern was consistent with someone reading or working at a desk. That was likely Dr. Voss. I landed the drone and considered my options. I could try to approach under the cover of darkness, but the camera would spot me. I could cut the power to the farmhouse, but that would alert her. I needed a distraction. I called the farmhouse's listed number from a burner phone. It rang 4 times, then a woman's voice. Cautious. Hello, Dr. Voss. My name is. I gave a false name, claiming to be a courier with a parcel that required her signature. She hesitated, then said she wasn't expecting anything. I insisted it was a misdelivery, and I needed her to confirm the address. She relented and gave me the address, confirming I had the right place. I'll be there in 20 minutes, I said. I used those 20 minutes to prepare. I changed into a delivery uniform I had stashed in the car. Complete with a cap and sunglasses, I drove up to the gate, which opened automatically. After I buzzed the intercom, the camera tracked me as I walked to the front door, carrying a cardboard box. Dr. Voss answered before I could knock. She was a tall woman in her mid-50s, with sharp features and wary eyes. She wore a lab coat over casual clothes, and she held a tablet in her hand. Parcel for you, I said. Holding out the box, she took it, her eyes scanning my face. I don't recognize you, new guy. Just started last week, I smiled, keeping my voice light. She opened the box, and her expression changed. Inside was a note, from Alistair. The project is reassigned. You are to meet with the new lead at the old location. Urgent. I had forged the note, using information from the USB drive to make it seem authentic. It was a gamble, but it paid off. Her eyes widened, and she looked up at me. Who are you? She asked, her voice trembling. I'm the one who's going to get you out of here safely. I stepped inside, closing the door behind me. You've been hiding from Crow, haven't you? He's been using you for the Genesis project, and you want out. She backed away, clutching the tablet. How do you know about that? Because I'm in the same situation. He used me to take down one of his assets, and now he's trying to erase the loose ends. You're a loose end, Doctor. She stared at me for a long moment, then she set down the tablet and sighed. You have no idea what you've stumbled into. Then tell me. She led me to a study filled with papers and laptops. On the wall was a map of the world, covered with pins and string. It looked like a conspiracy theorist's dream. The Genesis project isn't a bioweapon, she said. It's a biological tracking system, nanobots that can be injected into a person's bloodstream, allowing Crow to monitor their location, their health, even their conversations. He's been using it on his most valuable assets, including Michael. My blood ran cold. He was tracking Michael, through nanobots, yes. And when Michael started to suspect, Crow decided to eliminate him, but he needed a clean kill, one that couldn't be traced back to him. That's where you came in. You were the perfect patsy, a vengeful outsider with no connections to Crow's network. I had been a cleaner, a biological disposal system, and Victor had been the handler who made sure I stayed on target. Where is the tracking system now? I asked. Destroyed. I destroyed all records and samples before I fled. She held up the tablet, but I kept one thing. The master blueprint. It's encrypted, and I have the only key. I looked at the tablet, then at her. Give it to me. Why should I trust you? Because I want what you want, to destroy Crow, and I have the resources to do it. She studied me, then handed me the tablet. It's yours, but be careful. Crow has eyes everywhere. I took it, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on my shoulders. The game was no longer about revenge. It was about survival, and I intended to win. Section 6. The Trap Springs. I left the farmhouse with the tablet tucked securely in my bag, and a renewed sense of purpose. Dear Voss agreed to go into hiding at a safe house I arranged for Francesca. She was a loose end I couldn't afford to have cut, but I was also a loose end, and Crow knew it. The drive back to London was long, and I kept checking my mirrors. No tail, no anomalies, yet the feeling of being watched persisted, a phantom itch between my shoulder blades. When I reached the hotel, I didn't go straight to my room. Instead, I walked to a nearby pub, ordered a pint, and found a corner table with a clear view of the entrance. I needed time to think. The master blueprint on the tablet was the key to Crow's downfall. If I could leak it to the right authorities, or better yet, to the media, his entire network would be exposed. The nanobot tracking system was a violation of international law, a tool for mass surveillance and control. It would destroy him. But I had to be careful. Crow had resources that dwarfed mine. He had hackers, lawyers, assassins. He could bury the story before it ever saw the light of day. I needed a plan. The tablet had one weakness. The encryption key was embedded in Dr. Voss's biometric signature, her fingerprint and iris scan. Without her, the data was useless, and she was now under my protection. That meant I had to keep her alive, and I had to move fast. I finished my pint and walked back to the hotel. The lobby was empty, the receptionist absorbed in a phone. I took the stairs to the third floor, my footsteps echoing in the stairwell. When I reached my door, I noticed it was slightly ajar, a sliver of darkness, barely visible against the frame. My heart stopped. I drew the pistol I had concealed under my jacket, a compact 9mm I had acquired through Francesca. I pressed my back against the wall and nudged the door open with my foot. The room was dark, the curtains were drawn, I could smell something metallic, blood. I flicked on the light. The room was a wreck. My belongings were strewn across the floor, my laptop smashed, my clothes slashed, and in the center of the bed lay a figure, drenched in crimson. Victor. He was alive, barely. His face was pale, his breathing shallow, a gunshot wound in his shoulder, another in his leg. He looked up at me with glassy eyes. About time you showed up, he rasped. I knelt beside him, checking his pulse, weak, but steady. What happened? Crow's men, they found me. I tried to warn you. He coughed, blood flecking his lips. He knows you have the blueprint. He's coming for you. Where is he? Doesn't matter. He'll find you. Victor's hand gripped my arm with surprising strength. But I left you something. In the safe deposit box, number 7-3-1-9, under the name you used in the operation. What is it? Proof, real proof, enough to take him down. He smiled weakly. I was never his man. I was always yours. I stared at him, 1,000 questions swirling in my mind, but there was no time. Sirens wailed in the distance. Someone had reported the gunshots. The police would be here any minute. I had to leave. I grabbed the tablet, my bag, and the few things I could salvage. Victor would have to fend for himself. It was the only way. I slipped out the back window, dropped onto the fire escape, and disappeared into the London night. The safe deposit box was in a bank in the financial district, one that offered anonymity and cash-only transactions. I arrived at dawn, wearing a disguise, a fake beard, glasses, a different coat. The clerk barely looked at me as I opened box 7-3-1-9. Inside was a thick envelope and a small USB drive. I took both and left quickly, my heart hammering. I found a 24-hour internet cafe and plugged in the drive. The files were encrypted, but Victor had left a note with the password, the date of our first meeting, the only thing we both remembered. The files loaded. They were financial records, email chains, and audio recordings, everything that tied Crow to Michael's operations, and more. There were recordings of Crow giving orders to eliminate the loose ends, including me, and a detailed plan for the Genesis project's deployment on a global scale. It was a bombshell, but as I scrolled through the files, I noticed something strange. One of the recordings was time-stamped 2 days ago. In it, a voice I recognized, Crow's, was speaking to someone else. Asterisk, the agent has the blueprint. That's fine. Let him think he's in control. Asterisk, comma, asterisk, and Dr. Voss, asterisk, comma, asterisk, she's expendable, but the blueprint is a trap. It contains a tracking chip that cannot be removed. Once he accesses it, we'll know his location at all times. Asterisk, my blood ran cold. I looked at the tablet in my bag, the blueprint Dr. Voss had given me. It was a lure. She had been working for Crow all along. She had planted the chip, knowing I would take the bait. I had walked right into his trap. I needed to destroy the tablet, but it was too late. The chip was already activated. They knew where I was. I heard the hum of engines outside the cafe. Black sedans, pulling up in synchronized formation, men in suits, climbing out with purpose. I had seconds. I grabbed the USB drive from Victor and shoved it into my pocket. Then I rushed to the back of the cafe, burst through the emergency exit, and sprinted into the alley. Bullets cracked against the brickwork behind me. I didn't look back. I climbed a fence, dashed through a construction site, and ducked into a subway station. I needed to disappear, again, but this time, I had no Victor to help me, no Cypher, no Francesca. I was alone. And Alistair Crowe had won the first round, but the game wasn't over yet. I had Victor's files, I had the truth, and I had one thing Crowe didn't expect, a reason to fight, asterisk to be continued, asterisk. The subway station was a labyrinth of stale air, humming fluorescent lights, and the distant screech of brakes. I ducked into a maintenance corridor, pressing my back against the cold tile wall as my breath came in ragged gasps. The sounds of pursuit had faded, but I knew better than to relax. Crowe's men would be sweeping every exit, every platform, every shadow. I pulled out Victor's USB drive. It was small, innocuous, a black plastic nub that held the power to bring down Alistair Crowe, but power meant nothing if I was dead, and right now, I was a walking target with a tracking chip embedded in a tablet I no longer had. Asterisk wait, asterisk I stopped breathing. The tablet. I had left it in my bag when I fled the cafe, but the chip was in the blueprint itself, not the tablet. Dr. Voss had given me a physical copy of the blueprint, a printed document. I had scanned it into the tablet, but the original paper was still in my bag. Was the chip in the paper, or was it digital? I cursed my own paranoia. There was no time to analyze. I needed to assume the worst, that Crowe had tracked me not through the tablet's network, but through some physical marker planted in the document itself. The only way to neutralize it was to destroy everything that had touched it. I pulled off my jacket, turned it inside out, and checked every seam. Nothing. Then I checked my phone, still clean, but my bag, I had thrown it into a dumpster 2 blocks ago, hoping to mislead them. If the chip was in the bag, they'd be chasing a decoy. I allowed myself a sliver of hope. Then I heard footsteps, heavy, measured, coming down the maintenance stairs. I moved deeper into the tunnel, past a locked door marked electrical, authorized personnel only. The lock was old, a simple combination padlock. I pulled a paper clip from my pocket, force of habit, and worked the mechanism. It clicked open in 15 seconds. I slipped inside and closed the door behind me, enveloping myself in darkness punctuated only by the green glow of emergency lights. The room hummed with transformers and relays. I sat down on a concrete ledge, pulled out Victor's USB, and considered my next move. I had no computer, no safe house, no allies, but I had the files, and I had my mind. That would have to be enough. I needed 3 things: a place to study the evidence, a way to contact someone who could help, and a plan to turn the tables on Crowe before he found me. First, the files. Victor had encrypted them with a password. The date of our first meeting, I knew that date. It was burned into my memory. The day we met at a fundraising gala for the Genesis project, before I knew what it truly was, before Victor became my handler, before everything went wrong. But I had already accessed the files at the cafe. I had seen the recordings, the emails, the financial trails. What I hadn't done was fully download them. The USB contained only a partial extraction, enough to prove Crowe's involvement, but not enough to build a case that would survive a legal challenge. I needed to retrieve the full archive from Victor's hidden server. Victor had told me about it once, under duress. If I ever go dark, he had said, look for the signal, the old frequency, the one we used in Prague. Prague, that had been my first mission with Victor. 6 years ago, we had used a specific shortwave radio frequency to communicate with a contact. If Victor had left a beacon on that frequency, I could find his server, but that required a shortwave receiver, and I was in a subway tunnel. I looked around the electrical room. There was a control panel with various switches and meters. On the far wall, a rack of old telecommunications equipment, relics from before the digital age. Among them, a battered shortwave receiver, covered in dust, its antenna wire coiled like a dead snake. I could have laughed. Desperation had a way of providing. I powered on the receiver. It crackled to life, emitting a low hum. I tuned it to the frequency Victor and I had used in Prague, 7,235 megahertz, static. I adjusted the fine-tuning. Nothing. I tried again. Still nothing. Victor was either dead, or his beacon was inactive. Either way, I was on my own. I turned off the receiver and sat in silence. The hum of the transformers became a low thrum in my bones. I thought about Francesca, about Cypher, about everyone I had lost. I thought about Michael, whose death had started this whole nightmare. I thought about Dr. Voss, who had smiled at me, given me the blueprint, and then condemned me to die. Betrayal was a familiar taste. It coated my tongue like copper, but I couldn't afford to wallow. Crowe had won the first round, but the game wasn't over. I had Victor's partial files. I had the recordings. I had the truth. And I had one card left to play. Dr. Voss, she had sold me out. Yes, but she had also given me the blueprint. Why, if she was working for Crowe, why not just kill me? Why the elaborate trap? Unless she wasn't fully committed to Crowe, unless she had her own agenda. I replayed the conversation in my mind. She had been nervous, avoiding eye contact. When she handed me the blueprint, her fingers had trembled. At the time, I thought it was stress. Now I realized it might have been guilt. Perhaps Dr. Voss was a double agent, not for me, but for herself. Perhaps she Wanted Crow to fall, but was too afraid to help directly. The blueprint S-trap could have been a test. If I was smart enough to survive, I might still be useful. It was a thin thread, but I had nothing else. I pulled out my phone, dumb, encrypted, burner, and dialed a number I had memorized years ago. It was a dead drop system Victor had set up, a voicemail box that routed through a dozen servers. I didn't expect an answer, but I left a message anyway. Dear Voss, you know who this is, you know what you did. I have the files. I know about the tracking chip, but I also know you're not a killer. You're a scientist. You wanted to expose Project Genesis before it destroyed everything. Crow used you, just like he used me. Help me finish this. Call this number back within 6 hours, or I'll release the partial files to the press with a full account of your involvement. You'll be implicated either way, but if you help, I'll make sure your name is cleared. I hung up. It was a bluff. The partial files wouldn't implicate her directly, but she didn't know that. Now I had to survive until she called. The electrical room felt suddenly small. I checked my watch. 11:47 p.m. The subway would run for another hour, then shut down for maintenance. After that, I'd have to move above ground, where Crow's men would be waiting. I needed a new identity, fast, in my pocket. I had a slim wallet with 3 fake IDs, a stack of cash, and a keycard for a lower-end hotel on the outskirts of the city. The hotel was a safe house Victor had set up years ago, never used, never compromised. If it still existed, I memorized the address, 1427 Meridian Street, room 312. The keycard was blank, no markings. I slid it into an inner pocket. Time to move. I cracked open the door to the maintenance corridor, empty. The footsteps I had heard earlier were gone, probably redirected by my decoy bag. I crept out, keeping to the shadows, and made my way toward the end of the platform. A train was pulling in, the 12:05 to the west side. I boarded, found a seat near the emergency exit, and kept my head down. The train was nearly empty. A homeless man slept in the corner. A couple argued in hushed tones. A teenager scrolled through his phone, headphones on. I watched the tunnel walls blur past, my reflection ghosting over the dark glass. I looked like a hunted animal. My eyes were hollow, my jaw tight. I hadn't slept in 30 hours, but sleep was a luxury I couldn't afford. At the next station, I got off. I took a series of random transfers, doubling back, switching lines, always watching for tails. By 1:30 a.m., I was confident I had shaken any pursuit. I emerged onto the street. The city was quiet, slick with recent rain. Streetlights cast pools of orange light on the wet asphalt. I walked briskly, staying in the shadows, toward Meridian Street. The hotel was a 5-story walk-up wedged between a laundromat and a pawn shop. The neon sign flickered, Meridian Arms. It looked exactly as forgotten as Victor had intended. I used the keycard on the side entrance. The lock clicked. I climbed the narrow stairs to the 3rd floor, found room 312, and let myself in. The room was small, Spartan, a single bed with threadbare sheets, a desk, a lamp, a closet, a window that faced a brick wall, but it had electricity, and a phone line. I plugged in my burner phone to charge and sat down at the desk. I spread out everything I had, the USB drive, the fake IDs, a few $100s in cash, and a map of the city. I needed a plan. The partial files on the USB contained enough evidence to ruin Crow in the court of public opinion, but not enough for a conviction. To bring him down legally, I needed the full archive, the hidden server Victor had set up. The server was likely located in a secure facility, probably in Crow's own headquarters. That was suicide, but there was another possibility. Victor had mirrored the data to multiple locations. One of those locations might be accessible. I remembered a conversation we had in Prague. Victor had mentioned a black site in the industrial district, a data center that hosted untraceable servers for clients like Crow. If Victor had rented space there under a pseudonym, the server might still be active. I pulled out my phone and searched for the data center, Nexus Data Vaults. It was a legitimate business, but its security was known to be porous for the right price. I had a contact there, a woman named Yuki, who worked the night shift and had a gambling problem. I dialed her number. It rang 6 times before a groggy voice answered. Hello, Yuki, it's me. I need a favor. A pause. I told you never to call this number, I know, but this is life or death. I need access to a server at Nexus, a hidden one, under the name VK. I can't. They changed the protocols after the last breach. I have 20,000 in cash, and I'll clear your debt at the Lotus Casino. Silence. Then, meet me at the loading dock in 1 hour. Come alone. The line went dead. I had an hour. I used it to study the files on the USB, memorizing key names, dates, and transactions. The more I knew, the harder it would be for Crow to discredit me. At 2:30 a.m., I left the hotel and made my way to the industrial district. Nexus Data Vaults was a squat, windowless building surrounded by a chain-link fence. I circled to the loading dock, where a single light bulb buzzed over a steel door. Yuki was waiting. She was a small woman with tired eyes and a cigarette dangling from her lips. She wore a security uniform, the badge half hidden under her jacket. "You're late," she said. "I'm here," I replied. "The money." I handed her an envelope with 20,000, all the cash I had. She counted it, nodded, and led me inside. The data center was a cathedral of humming servers, blinking lights, and chilled air. Yuki guided me to a row of racks near the back, past cameras I knew she had disabled. "This is it," she said, pointing to a server with a label that read VK117, "Access panel is biometric, you'll need Victor's thumbprint." I had anticipated that. Victor's thumbprint wasn't available, but I had something else, a recording of his voice. The server might have voice recognition as a backup. I plugged my phone into the server's auxiliary port and played a snippet of Victor's voice from an old recording we had made during training. The server's screen flickered, voice match confirmed. A synthesized voice said, "Welcome, Victor." The screen opened to a directory. I scrolled through folders, my heart pounding. There were terabytes of data, financial records, operational plans, video footage, and more. I found what I needed, a folder labeled Genesis, Full Archive. I began downloading it to a portable drive Yuki had provided. The transfer would take 15 minutes. I watched the progress bar, my skin prickling. Every second was an eternity. "You have to go," Yuki said. "The morning shift comes in at 4. Just a little longer." The bar reached 80%, 90%, 95%, then the door at the far end of the data center slammed open, alarms blared, red lights flashed. "Security breach," a voice shouted. I yanked the drive out at 99%. Yuki shoved me toward a service exit. "Go. I'll hold them off." I didn't argue. I ran. The service exit led to a narrow alley cluttered with dumpsters. I vaulted over one, landed hard, and sprinted toward the street. Behind me, I heard shouts, the crackle of radios, and then gunfire. I didn't look back. I reached the street, dove into a sewer grate, and pulled it closed over my head. I landed in ankle-deep water, the stench of rot filling my nostrils. I coughed, but I didn't stop moving. The sewer tunnels were a maze. I had no map, no light except the dim glow from my phone. I splashed through the water, following the current, hoping it would lead to an exit. My lungs burned, my legs ached, but I had the drive. I had 99% of the archive. I found a maintenance ladder and climbed up to a manhole cover. I pushed it open, peered out. The street was empty. A residential block, houses dark, cars parked. I emerged into the cold night air. I was soaked in sewage, shivering, but alive. I needed a safe place to review the files. The hotel was compromised. Yuki had been caught, and she would talk. I had to disappear again. I thought of Dr. Voss. I had given her 6 hours. It had been 3. I found a payphone, a relic, but still functional, and dialed the dead drop. No new messages. I hung up and walked. I walked through the sleeping city, past boarded-up shops and homeless encampments, until I reached a 24-hour laundromat. I went inside, bought a cheap pair of clothes from a lost and found bin, and changed in the bathroom. The drive was safe in my pocket. I sat down on a plastic chair and watched the dryer spin, trying to think. The archive would tell me everything, but I needed a computer powerful enough to process it, and a place where I could work without fear of interruption. I remembered an old contact, a hacker known as Sparrow, who ran a safe house in the old warehouse district. Sparrow owed me a favor. From a job in Berlin, I had saved his life. I found his number in my mental Rolodex and called him on the payphone. "Sparrow, it's me, Jesus Christ. I thought you were dead. The news is full of. I need a favor, a place to work, secure connection, and a computer. Where are you?" I gave him the address of a nearby diner. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. Make it 30. I gotta clear my schedule." I hung up and walked to the diner. It was a greasy spoon, open all night, with cracked vinyl booths and a coffee pot that had been brewing since the Nixon administration. I ordered a cup and waited. Sparrow arrived in 40 minutes, looking exactly as I remembered, scrawny, paranoid, with a nervous twitch. He slid into the booth across from me. "You look like hell," he said. "Feel like it. You have the setup. In the truck. Let's go." We left the diner and got into his rusted van. He drove to a warehouse on the outskirts, the kind of place where the door didn't lock and the windows were boarded. Inside, he had a makeshift lab, a few monitors, a server rack, and a generator. I plugged in the drive. The files began to load. Sparrow watched over my shoulder as I sorted through the data. Holy shit, this is everything. It's the end of Alistair Crow, I said, but even as I said it, I knew it wasn't that simple. The files would destroy Crow, yes, but they would also implicate powerful people. Politicians, military leaders, corporate executives, who had supported Project Genesis, releasing this data would trigger a firestorm, innocent people would get caught in the blast, #the final move, the screen glowed with rows of names and dates, each one a thread in Crow's web of corruption. Sparrow leaned in, his fingers hovering over the keyboard like he was afraid to touch it. If we hit send on this, half the British government goes down, the military, half the pharmaceutical industry. Innocent people will get caught in the crossfire, secretaries, interns, people who had no idea what they were signing up for. I stared at the send button, my finger hovering an inch above it. He was right. Crow had built his empire on layers of plausible deniability. The archive contained emails from low-level employees asking questions, memos that had been redacted, receipts for office supplies that had been repurposed for the Genesis project. None of those people deserved to have their lives destroyed. But if I didn't send it, Crow would rebuild. He would find another Michael, another Victor, another me. He would keep using the nanobots to control and kill, and no one would ever stop him. My burner phone buzzed. I grabbed it, my heart jumping. It was the dead drop number. "Hello," I said, keeping my voice flat. "I'll help you, dear." Voss's voice was shaky, but firm. I was wrong. I thought if I did what he said, he'd let my daughter go, but he never intended to. He's been holding her in a compound in Scotland this whole time. I sat up straight. "Your daughter?" "Lila, she's 7. He took her 3 years ago, right after I started working on Genesis. He said if I ever told anyone, he'd kill her. That's why I gave you the blueprint with the tracker. I had no choice." Sparrow looked at me, his eyes wide. I mouthed "daughter," and he nodded, typing furiously on his keyboard. "I know where the compound is, dear," Voss continued, "and I know how to disable the nanobots. The tracking chip in the blueprint was a decoy. The real backdoor is in the master code. Something even Crow doesn't know about. I built it in case I ever got the chance to take him down." I glanced at the archive on the screen. "I have 99% of the Genesis files. Victor left them for me." "Victor," she sounded surprised. "He's alive." "I don't know. He was shot in my hotel room. He told me he was never Crow's man." A pause. He was telling the truth. Victor's sister was one of the first test subjects for Genesis. She died when the nanobots malfunctioned. He's been working to take Crow down ever since. That's why he found you. He knew you had the motive and the skills to finish what he started. Everything clicked into place. Victor's quiet intensity, his unwavering loyalty, the way he had risked his life to save mine. He hadn't been using me. We had been using each other. For the same reason. "Where are you?" I asked. "At the old lighthouse on the coast. I've been hiding here since I left the farmhouse. Crow's men are looking for me, but they won't find me here. Meet me at dawn. Bring the archive. We'll end this together." She hung up. Sparrow looked up from his keyboard. "I pulled up the lighthouse. It's abandoned, on a cliff 3 hours north of here, and I found the compound in Scotland, remote, heavily guarded, but there's a weak point in the security system. I can hack into it and disable the cameras for 10 minutes. That's all you'll have to get the girl out." I nodded. "What about the archive?" "I'll split it. I'll separate the core evidence against Crow and his inner circle from the rest. I'll send the good stuff to the FBI and Interpol, and I'll bury the rest. No innocent people get hurt." "Thank you," he shrugged. "You saved my life in Berlin. This is just payback, but you should know, Crow's men are tracking the archive. They'll be here any minute. I'll hold them off. You go to the lighthouse." I opened my mouth to argue, but he cut me off. "No, I'm a hacker. I'm good at hiding. You're the one who has to finish this. Take the drive, and take this." He handed me a small pistol, just in case. I took the gun, my throat tight. "I'll come back for you," he smiled, a rare, genuine smile. "No, you won't, but that's okay. Just make sure Crow pays for what he did." The sound of breaking glass echoed from the front of the warehouse. Sparrow pushed me toward the back door. "Go." "No." I ran, the drive clutched in my hand, the gun heavy in my pocket. Behind me, I heard gunshots, shouts, and then a single, deafening explosion. I didn't look back. The drive to the coast was a blur of rain and darkness. I kept checking my mirrors, but no one followed me. Sparrow had done his job. He had bought me time. I reached the lighthouse at dawn. The sky was streaked with pink and orange, and the waves crashed against the rocks below. Dear, Voss was waiting for me at the top, leaning against the railing, a small suitcase at her feet. She turned when she heard me come up the stairs. Her face was pale, but her eyes were determined. "You made it." "I made it. Sparrow didn't." She looked down at her feet. "I'm sorry. So many people have died because of this. Then let's make sure their deaths weren't for nothing." I held out the drive. "I have the archive. You said you have a backdoor in the code." She nodded, taking the drive and plugging it into her laptop. "The nanobots are designed to respond to a specific frequency. Crow uses it to activate and deactivate them, but I built a reverse frequency, one that will fry the nanobots and anyone who has them, including Crow, will it kill him? She hesitated. It will cause severe neurological damage. He'll be alive, but he'll never walk or talk again. He'll spend the rest of his life in a hospital bed, trapped in his own body. It's more than he deserves. I thought about all the people he had hurt, Leo, Angela, my father, Victor, Sparrow, Dr. Voss's daughter, all the lives he had destroyed. It's exactly what he deserves. She typed furiously on her laptop. I'm uploading the reverse frequency to Crow's personal device. It will activate when he answers his phone. All I need is for him to pick up. As if on cue, my burner phone rang. The caller ID was blocked. I answered, putting it on speakerphone. June. Crow's voice was cold, calm, like he was discussing the weather. You've been a very naughty girl, killing my men, stealing my files, running around with my scientists. I must say, I'm impressed. Most people would have given up by now. I'm not most people. No, you're not. That's why I'm offering you a deal. Come work for me. You're smart, resourceful, ruthless. You'd make an excellent lieutenant. I'll give you anything you want. Money, power, a new identity. All you have to do is hand over the archive and Dr. Voss. I glanced at Dr. Voss. She nodded, her finger hovering over the enter key. And if I refuse, I asked, then I'll kill you, slowly. And then I'll find every person you've ever cared about and kill them too, starting with your father. I know where he is, June. He's living in a small town in Canada, under a fake name. He thinks he's safe. He's not. My blood ran cold. I had sent my father to Canada after Leo's arrest, thinking he would be safe there. I should have known Crow would find him. You're bluffing, I said, keeping my voice steady. Am I? He chuckled. I have a man outside his house right now. He's been watching him for 3 days. All I have to do is make one phone call, and your father's head will be on a platter. Dr. Voss mouthed. No, I took a deep breath. You know what, Crow, you're right. I am smart enough to know that you're lying, and smart enough to know that you're already dead. I pressed the enter key on Dr. Voss's laptop. There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line, then a scream, a gurgling, choking scream, then nothing. Dr. Voss closed her laptop. It's done. The nanobots in his body have fried his brain. He's alive, but he's a vegetable. And the reverse frequency has spread to all the nanobots in the system. Every single one of them is destroyed. Genesis is over. I sank down onto the floor, my legs giving out. The weight of everything I had been through hit me all at once. The betrayal, the loss, the fear, the revenge. I had won. It was finally over. Dr. Voss sat down next to me, putting a hand on my shoulder. Thank you for giving me my daughter back. I nodded, unable to speak. She stood up, grabbing her suitcase. I'm going to Scotland to get Lila. Sparrow sent me the security codes. I'll be in and out in 10 minutes. After that, we're going to Canada. We'll start new lives there. You should come with us. I shook my head. I can't. I have too many ghosts here. I need to go somewhere where no one knows who I am. She smiled sadly. I understand, but if you ever need anything at all, you know where to find me. She left, and I was alone in the lighthouse, watching the sun rise over the ocean. I pulled out my phone and called my father. He answered on the first ring, his voice worried. June, are you okay? I heard there was an explosion in London. I'm fine, Dad, everything's fine. Crow is gone. It's over, he sighed, a sound of pure relief. Thank God. When are you coming home? I'm not yet. I need some time. I need to figure out who I am now that I'm not just a girl looking for revenge. Take all the time you need. I'll be here. I love you. I love you too, Dad. I hung up, and then I took the SIM card out of my phone and threw it into the ocean. I threw the phone after it. I threw the gun, the drive, everything that tied me to my old life. I walked down the stairs of the lighthouse, and into the rising sun. 6 months later, I was living in a small village in Portugal, working as a waitress in a beachside cafe. I had changed my name, my hair, my accent. No one here knew anything about my past. No one knew about Leo, or Angela, or Crow, or the nanobots. No one knew about the girl who had burned down an empire and walked away. I spent my days serving coffee and watching the waves. I spent my nights reading, and walking along the beach, and learning to be alone without being lonely. I still had scars. I still had nightmares. I still flinched when someone touched me from behind, and I still slept with a knife under my pillow. But the anger was gone. The hunger for revenge was gone. For the first time in my life, I was free. One evening, as I was closing up the cafe, a man walked in. He was tall, with graying hair and a scar across his cheek. He leaned against the counter, and smiled. Long time no see, June. I stared at him, my heart stopping. Victor, he nodded, his eyes crinkling at the corners. I heard you were here. I had to see for myself. I thought you were dead. Almost. The police found me in the hotel room. They took me to the hospital. I recovered, and then I disappeared. I've been laying low, making sure Crow's remaining associates don't come looking for us. He pulled out a chair and sat down. How have you been? I smiled, a real smile. I've been good, better than good. I'm happy. He nodded. Good, you deserve it. After everything you've been through, you deserve to be happy. We sat in silence for a while, watching the sun set over the ocean. What are you going to do now? I asked. He shrugged. I don't know. Travel, see the world, maybe find a place to settle down. What about you? I think I'm already home. He stood up, putting his hand on my shoulder. I'll leave you to it, but if you ever need anything at all, you know how to find me. He turned to leave, but I called after him, Victor. He turned around. Thank you for everything. He smiled. You're welcome, June. Goodbye. He walked out of the cafe and into the night. I watched him go, and then I locked the door and turned off the lights. I walked outside and stood on the beach, breathing in the salt air. The waves crashed against the shore, and the stars came out, one by one. For the first time in my life, I had no plan, no enemies, no revenge to seek. I had nothing but the future, stretching out before me, bright and endless. I was free, and this time, it was real.